Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm Charlie Eisner, the editor. Joining me, Josh Mansfield. It is Tuesday, December 20th. Christmas is almost here. The holidays are in full swing. I'm going to go down to the Rockefeller Center tree today, Josh, this afternoon, and then walk around the holiday market here in New York. What is there like a Pocatello holiday zone?
Well, no. Let me give you a reference. I think yesterday it was like -13 with wind chill. So no one really goes outside and hangs out for that kind of weather. But I will say it's not as bad as where I'm going. The low tomorrow night in Helena without wind chill is -28.
My God.
There's a high wind advisory warning to couple with that. So,
wow. That is icy.
yeah.
Whew.
Not going outside all weekend.
We've got kudos to those who play disc golf in those conditions. I am way too soft to do that.
No.
We got part 2 of our storylines bracket today. Quick scheduling note, and then some quick hot stove news, and then we'll get to that. Scheduling note. So next week, we're on a normal schedule this week. We will have our Thursday show. It's going to be our gaffes and weird stuff bracket, which I've been really looking forward to. Josh and I have been laughing a lot in preparation for that. And then next week, we will have a roundtable episode for between Christmas and New Year's. It'll probably be just the one show next week, as we are kind of taking a little bit of a break here over the holidays. So that'll be pre-recorded. We are likely to do another pre-recorded show the first week of January, as Josh and I are both going to be on vacation. We are anticipating some sponsorship news that first week of January in particular. So if it feels like we have to find a way to take a break from our vacation and get into the studio and do a show, we will. But it's going to require a high bar of magnitude of news for that to happen. So just going to level with you right now. We might not talk about stuff until the second week of January. But TBD. So looking forward to getting ready for the season. I mean, we're not that far from the season, Josh.
We're not.
It's crazy.
It feels weird.
Middle toward the end of February, we've got, All-Star Weekend, and then we've got the LVC right around the corner. So it's coming up quick. So that's the plan for these next couple of weeks. I think you're really going to enjoy our emerging sports podcast roundtable next week. I'm not going to spill too many details about it because I want people to be a little bit surprised. So that is the plan. And so before we get to the part 2 of our storylines bracket, we do have some news. A lot of players announcing that they are leaving their companies at the end of the year, their sponsorships. So let's go through the list. James Proctor, after 3 years at Innova, announces that he is going to be leaving in a fairly terse but classic Instagram post. I'll just read it because it's like, this is the classic of the genre. Representing Innova Discs and having those wings on my back was always a dream of mine. I am very grateful for all of the support I received over the last 3 years. That being said, I will be moving in a different direction for 2023, and I am super excited for what's ahead. Pretty much every post about leaving a sponsor exactly like this one. Usually people go on and on, but James kept it to the point. Thoughts on James heading off of Innova?
The only thing that will really interest me in this move is if he's going to announce full-time tour or a more extensive tour than what he currently does. But James is he an engineer? Is that what it is?
I actually don't remember what he does for full-time work. I don't remember
either. Anyway, he is a professional who works a lot. And so he plays the West Coast Swing and then a couple extra events every year. And great player. He's fun to watch if you haven't had the chance to watch him. I think he was on coverage at Beaver State Fling a couple years before COVID, and real fun to watch. But yeah, until he starts touring a little bit more, I'm just not super engaged in this one.
Well, here's the thing I'll say about this.
Okay.
I'm interested in what it means and what happens with Innova the rest of the way. Because Innova obviously just backed up the truck to pay Calvin.
Mm-hmm.
And so do we see a more of an exodus? There are more options than ever for players to get a sponsor that is not Innova. Obviously 20 years ago it was Innova and Discraft. And then, obviously more companies have come around, but even some of the larger companies, there's not that many sponsorship deals that kind of reach the level of top pros. And so now with all these new companies emerging and wanting to throw money around, we're starting to see there be more options. So that huge contingent of Innova sponsored pros that's in that tier 2, 3, 4 of player, are a lot of those people going to stick around, or are we going to see an exodus? That's something that I'm interested to watch, because we have another player leaving Innova, Maria Oliva, maybe the biggest news of this week. I think Maria Oliva is still somebody who could level up into a top 5 pro. It's not out of the question.
This move feels similar to the Valerie Mondahano move last year.
Totally.
In potential, in value, in the feel of the move feels very, very similar to me. This one I think is the more interesting of the Innova moves that were announced this week. And I guess in terms of your Innova point, can this exodus be worse than Ricky, Kona, Valerie? Remember last year, right?
No, I think from a big scale standpoint, probably not.
I get maybe more move, right?
But we know AB is gone. Maria Oliva is gone. I wouldn't put James Proctor in the same category as those two. Those are young players, a lot of potential,
Mm-hmm.
and I just think that it's possible that Innova is going to start to let some people go.
Yeah.
I think the manufacturers are realizing that there's more value now these days in having star players,
Mm-hmm.
and less value in having a wide geographic representation. Because I think, in the olden days, you wanted players from all over the country who were staples on your team. So you wanted the best player in Oregon or whatever to rep your brand, because that's going to sell discs to players in Oregon. But the consumption model and the way that people decide about discs has totally changed with the internet and the emergence of pro disc golf. So now people want to buy their favorite pros discs and not the best player in their area's discs. I'm speculating about that.
I don't know. Dallin Blanchard is the 1030 something rated guy from Southeast Idaho.
Right.
And he has a signature run of tombs that I know are very, very popular around Idaho because, the geographical representation. People from around here like having a pro that is sponsored. In Montana, Kristen Dietrich is really, really popular up in Montana. It doesn't have a signature disc, but those are just examples of I still think there's some power to it, and I think those guys get a lot of value out of being with Innova.
Yeah, that's fair. But anyway, this trend is not confirmed. I'm just saying that it could be something to watch. Note about Maria Oliva. Over on Twitter, somebody said, PGA Stats posted the news that she's leaving. And then somebody replied, I'm guessing she might be headed to Lone Star Disc. She's a Texan that could fit nicely in their lineup. And Lone Star Disc official Twitter account replied, that would be cool. And so there's been a little bit of chatter going on there. So make of it what you will. It certainly does make sense that Lone Star would be the company to pick up Oliva.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure we talked about that as a potential
It
move.
was on our list. It was one of the highest potential list on our list. Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. Okay. Scott Withers out at Discraft. That did not last long.
Nope.
Big end of a guy. Switch to Discraft. Woo. But, he just didn't really play that great this season, to be perfectly honest. And I think it's a similar story potentially there. These companies are going to be consolidating their marketing dollars into their top players. And it's not like Discraft, they already have a super deep team, and some of their tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 people have played up. Gossage,
Yep.
Ellis.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention a very top-heavy team already between Paige, Missy, Chris, and Paul.
Sure.
It's a lot of money tied up there.
Erica Stinchcombe will not be returning to Westside. Sort of implied in her post that she was surprised that there was no deal on the table. So we've seen Westside do this. You know, they kind of dropped Nico. You know, they just didn't renew the contract, and it sounds like maybe something similar happened here for Erica Stinchcombe. None of those folks have announced where they're headed yet. Now, the last note here, Drew Gibson has signed a deal with RPM Discs out of New Zealand, and he's going to bag one of their discs. It's the Kotuku, but he renamed it the White Heron. And he said because of the to appeal to the American market. You know, look, I think it's very interesting that Drew does these kind of, you know, he's the open bag. He can do these kind of side deals for individual discs. You know, he's got the putter. Now he's got this overstable mid-range. I'm sure it will sell better now. I just hate that he renamed it.
I do too.
I despise that. Like, Kotuku is a cool name. Like, sure, you might have to learn how to pronounce it, like Drew did during his YouTube video announcement. But it's not like it's not any weirder than any other disc name.
Yeah,
and like
yes.
I like that it's like a native New Zealand word as opposed to white heron.
Yes,
I don't know. It's just
and that's like all the RPM discs have those names,
and it's cool.
It's really cool. It's unique. I love it. I love it too. But whatever, it's fine. But yeah, but to your point. If you offer Drew money to throw a disc, any disc you want that you want to move, he'll probably do it, right? Like that's he now has his own line of discs. He has the Eva 7s as his putters, and then he now has the RPM discs, and he throws Infinite that we know he has signature discs with. So even though with the open bag he can throw anything, he's now got 4 companies for sure that he has contractual obligations to throw.
It's to me, it's very smart. I think Drew is pioneering in this direction, which is a direction we are going to end up going overall.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a great deal for RPM. You know, you can pay a fraction of the cost that it would cost to sponsor a pro entirely and still get major sort of recognition for your brand. And here it is getting talked about, and now people are like, "Oh, RPM disc, interesting. What's up with them?" I think it's just kind of like a win-win for both Drew and the manufacturer. So,
well, and all he's got to do is throw that mid-range once, 550 feet, you know, just crazy far, and someone's going to go buy it. And then if they like the disc or the company or the plastic, they're just going to buy the rest of it. And Drew didn't bag any of those,
right?
Yeah, it's real smart from RPM.
High upside.
Yeah. Two other things I think we were amiss not to talk about. Congratulations to the 49ers for securing top seed in the NFC West. It's impressive. Mr. Relevant.
Brock. I'm not going to say his full nickname here on the show. It's we look good. I mean, over the last like 6 to 8 weeks, we've been the best team in the NFL, and I'm fired up. I was very, you know, when Jimmy went down, I was like, how is this possible that we're going to lose 2 of our starting quarterbacks to season-ending injuries? This is just horrible snake bit. We were so good. Like, this is our chance to go to win the Super Bowl. But you know what? I think because of how many skillful players we have on the roster on offense right now, we don't need a perfect quarterback. We just need a competent one. And clearly Brock Purdy is a competent quarterback.
Yes, he is.
So,
C-Mac trade looks better and better as the season goes on.
I'm ready. Bring on the Eagles, man. We're gonna clown them. You heard it here first. We're gonna destroy the Eagles on national television during the playoffs.
I will take that bet.
As in, you want the Eagles?
I want the Eagles.
All right. Well, we'll when the spread comes out, Josh, we'll put money on it.
All right, deal. Second piece of news. Congratulations to all the Argentina World Cup fans. What a game.
Incredible game.
That was unreal. That was so good.
I was with my wife's family who lives in rural Pennsylvania, they're not soccer people. Okay.
Sure.
It's an NFL crowd. They don't watch the NBA. They only watch football, basically. Okay. And maybe it's some baseball. But like soccer is a lame sport. They don't score enough. The whole thing. Okay. By the end of that game, because I insisted on having it on, and thank God it didn't conflict with the NFL games. They were locked in. People are asking me the rules questions, what's going on with the penalty kicks, and it was obviously just an incredible showcase of the world's most popular sport. I feel bad for people who are just like, I'm not into soccer, because he just missed out. It was just so really great. And Messi, like it's just there's so many stories. It's beautiful, and I was rooting huge for Argentina.
That's right. I was rooting for France, but not disappointed that Messi got his cup. So that's kind of my back and forth. So I didn't really mind too much. But man, Mbappe, the guy's incredible.
He's incredible. All right, it is time to get into the part 2 of our storylines bracket. I want to just give an honorable mention because it was funny. I was driving after we recorded last week's show, and I was like, I feel like we left that out. And then somebody posted in our Discord, and they were like, how could you leave this out? And I was like, yeah, I really shouldn't have left that out. I don't know why it didn't come to me when we were making the storylines.
Same thing for me.
Gannon Buhr winning USDGC. I don't know that Gannon Buhr would deservedly be a storyline on his own for the rest of his season, although it's arguable that he could get a late seed. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he won USDGC does seem like it could have had a spot in the bracket. I don't think he would have gone particularly far in the bracket, so it's not like we missed out on something that was going to win. But I just want to give an honorable mention to him because we didn't put him in, but I do think it deserves recognition as one of the big stories of the year.
Yep, I completely agree. I think like he probably gets, I don't know.
He could have won a first round matchup in a good matchup.
We could have. I think I would have seeded that fairly low, though, just given everything else I'm looking at, which means he probably takes on either the Tour Consolidation or Champions Cup inaugural year, and that, doesn't...
Yeah, it's just not quite enough.
You know what we should have said? We should have said that we did a play-in bracket, and for
we should have done a
16 speed.
Next year we'll do a play-in.
There we go.
We'll do a play-in. We'll have multiple play-ins. It'll be crazy. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, part 2, quarterfinals of our storylines bracket. Don't go anywhere. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Well, they've got the brand new Deluxe Rufuses available now. Some of them coming with all 3 upgrades, the Velcro patch, the lower side pocket upgrade, and the new Spacer Mesh shoulder pad upgrade. So check that out. They start at $324.99. I'm carrying a Rufus myself. Fantastic bag. A little bit on the smaller side, so if you're not somebody who wants to carry tons of discs, it's a great lightweight option, available now at pounddiscgolf.com. Welcome back to the Upshot. It is time to pick up our storylines bracket. We are in the quarterfinal round after last week's round of 16, and on we go. Will Argentina win it all? We'll find out. Just a reminder, in the first quarterfinal, we have number 1 seed Tour Consolidation taking on number 9, the resurgence of Simon Lizotte. And then we have the 4 and the 5, Christian Tatar's dominance versus the transgender rule changes from the PDGA. Then we have the Pro Tour selling the post-production rights for $500,000 to Jomez, the 3 seed taking on the 11 seed emergence of new manufacturers. And then finally, we have the 10 seed, the return of the Europeans taking on the 2 seed, the Champions Cup inaugural year, 4th major at WR Jackson. So we will begin with the top of the bracket. The Tour Consolidation between the PDGA and the Pro Tour versus the resurgence of Simon Lizotte. Josh, go.
I think if Simon wins a major or does something else besides besides winning Elite Series events, and that's not to say or to undermine the success that he had this season and the way that he was able to come back from the kind of, and really look like vintage Simon in terms of his performance. But I think if it was paired with a sponsorship move, a major, something else that really defines the season, then I think that might be enough. But the problem is Simon is just one of multiple on-course MPO storylines that were so prominent. Contract year Calvin, Ricky winning, even more events than Simon, Paul getting a 6X, that it's hard to give as much weight to Simon on the MPO side. And because of that, I still think tour consolidation, do I need to say more about that importance? Probably should win out here.
It's funny because as this Pro Tour kind of took things over this year, there were still moments where, at like the PDGA majors, where the lack of Pro Tour involvement, or, less involvement anyway, was sort of glaringly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
If you think back to the ticket situation at the World Championships, for example. And what I think is notable is that I've already gotten very used to the current status of the tour. There wasn't the drama of the NTs being some sort of like second-class citizen this year.
Mm-hmm.
That just didn't exist. And I just was completely ready to move on past it, which to me speaks to what a smart decision this was from the PDGA to willingly pass the baton.
Yep.
And I think it's just so, when we look back on this year, there's just no doubt in my mind that the discussion from 2022 of disc golf 10 years from now is going to be about this and not about Simon Lizotte.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if Simon goes on to win like 15 majors in the next 10 years or something, then maybe we'll be like, that was the year. But it's an amazing story. I feels bad for Simon to lose here in quarterfinals, but I just don't think that like, it's not like he was completely disappeared from our memories, right? It's one thing if it's just like, oh my God, this guy who we've completely forgotten about and don't talk about anymore came back and started winning.
If Scott
he
Stokely
was still
had
extremely
Simon's
relevant.
Season.
Yes.
Yeah. Scott Stokely has Simon's season.
Sure. He was still extremely relevant, right? He's still like the number one YouTube presence in disc golf. And I mean that.
Yeah.
Over Brody. I do mean that. He's the guy. Right, he's the one of the most popular players on planet Earth, and was before he started winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so, while it's an awesome story, I just don't think it can compare to what is this monumental business move that has the chance to like completely alter the landscape of professional disc golf forever. It remains to be seen what's all going to happen. But certainly the Pro Tour's emergence under the management of Jeff Spring has been a huge story on its own. And for this to happen now where the PGA concedes control of the professional scene is just, it's hard. It's easy to forget about it, but it's hard to overstate how important it is.
Yeah.
So it moves on for me.
All right. The next matchup, number 5, Kristen Tatar's dominance goes up against number 4, the transgender rule change.
This is a tough one. I think this might be the trickiest quarter, which is not a surprise. It's the 4 versus the 5.
Right.
I am not going to be overly swayed by recency bias. I think the correct answer here, and my vote, goes to Kristen Tatar's dominance. Now, let me tell you why. Because, a player, you could be like, well, she was already good. She already won a major. Like, this transgender rule has been it's been so much the talk of the entire disc golf universe. It's all true.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, Kristen Tatar has become an outright celebrity in Estonia. She's the most popular FPO player in the division. I think both sort of just, but anecdotally, you sort of sense that. But then, our fandom survey confirms her as not only the most popular FPO player, but the overall most popular player, period. Yes. She has all of the right ingredients to be like a superstar for the sport, an ambassador for the sport to the world, to Europe, to everybody. And I think that her performance this year has a whole lot to do with that. I don't think you see this same kind of popularity for Tatar if she has an average season by her standards, which would probably be like a couple Elite Series wins, maybe one major win, but Paige still dominates and is clearly the best player. But instead, no, it's just like Kristen was like unstoppable for long stretches of the tour and has become like an incredibly popular player. And I think that is a big deal because it says a lot about what it means for FPO to have a star of this caliber. It says a lot about what it means to Europe to have a star of this caliber. Without Kristen, did the Europeans go over, right? They don't win anything.
Yeah.
Albert Tom, well, obviously Simon. So with Simon accepted, Albert Tom won a silver, and that was it, right? Because Evelina and Henna didn't win any tournaments.
Who won PCS Sula in FPO?
Now you might be right about that. I don't remember.
I don't either, but I feel like because I remember the FPO. I mean, it was a weak field, right? But I don't remember who won.
I'm just gonna look it up right now. We have this info. I don't feel like there were a lot of strong players there.
Annikenstein won.
Sorry, it just doesn't count.
Open.
Like,
yeah.
The highest rated player was 939 rated. So
I remembered that a European had won PCS Sula, but I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember if it was like Henna or something, right? So wanted to double check that.
So anyway, I think the transgender rule change, it's an incredible divisive culture war topic. So of course it's going to get a lot of there's going to be a lot of smoke and fire around it. But I don't think that it's going to feel like it's some kind of has a lot of staying power as a topic of conversation going into next year even. So I vote for Tatar. But it's close.
It is close. And I think I agree with you. And the biggest point that I think you make there at the end about the staying power of this topic, the collective discussion, I think, is going to shift to Kristen Tatar over even, the transgender rule change in a month, like end of January. What is everyone going to be talking about? It's gonna be Kristen again, and that shows not only just like the importance of Kristen to last season, but I think the durability moving into next season of the Kristen storyline. Obviously, she has a bad season that begins to wean, but it's still definitely a topic that's going to come back. It's not the center of subject right now, but as competition gets closer, it's going to be again.
So Kristen Tatar will advance to face tour consolidation in the semifinals. Next matchup is the Pro Tour selling the post-production rights to Jomez for $500K versus the emergence of new manufacturers. Josh, your thoughts?
This one is harder than I thought because I still really believe that the Pro Tour selling the post-production rights to Jomez was one of just the monumental shifts in the way that disc golf media rights are going to interact in the sport. But the one other thing that I think is noteworthy is I think something like this was an inevitability, right? Pro Tour's control over the production rights to their events meant that eventually they were going to do something to capitalize on those rights not being captured by the Disc Golf Network. And that's my one hesitation with that point. On the flip side, the emergence of new manufacturers is, in my opinion, it's it's a big deal because of the way it's changing the disc golf market. And I think that January 1 is going to give us a lot more insight into how the next season looks. And so it's hard to make kind of those predictions, because if someone, really notable moves over there, and we've heard some speculation about who that might be, then it really could alter the way that we look at manufacturer rankings, for example, next year. It also means, in terms of new manufacturers and the power that they have in the sport, that if a player at one of those smaller manufacturers were to win something really important, win Champions Cup or what have you, I really think that in terms of this is something I think already has a lessened hold in disc golf. But Innova, though they may be the most popular brand by far, and the most sold brand ever because of their history in the sport, I think a lot of people would argue that, there's nothing better about Innova plastic. In fact, Innova is notoriously inconsistent. It's, everything's compared to a destroyer because of just the durability of the name of the destroyer. But I've felt new plastics from other companies that I think are amazing. I like their feel, their durability, the flex to them. And so I think as you get more and more companies experimenting, pushing with that, the more that collective conscious just agrees that lots of manufacturers have lots of good plastic and different plastic, I think that's going to become increasingly more important. The problem is, though, I don't think any of that happened this season. And so while this is the catalyst, it's the beginnings of it, we're not seeing the full impact yet. Whereas the Pro Tour one is the fruition of a similar thing on the media side. Well, the opposite on the media side, but is the end product really, or the big step of some initial catalyst that we were talking about last season. So I think I probably give it to the Pro Tour selling post-production rights, but that was a really long-winded way of saying I really think it's close.
I think we're in agreement again. I can't quite pinpoint why I feel like it's the bigger story, but I think you make a good case that we're just seeing the beginnings of the new manufacturer story. And like a lot of these companies have started in the last 2 to 3 years. And so they're sort of finding a foothold through advertising, through sponsorships with pros. And like a lot of that's going to start to flood in the new year when we see these moves, finish taking place. The Jomez deal definitely feels important. It doesn't feel like it gives me a sense of what's next. Sure. Is Jomez going to get another deal like this at the end of next season? Are we going to see the Pro Tour try to consolidate under their own YouTube channel? Are we going to see the Pro Tour try to sell media rights to an outside media organization like an ESPN or Fox Sports? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of directions this could go. And I think, the most likely scenario is that Jomez and Pro Tour renew in some way. But
sure,
either way, I think it was a big step for post-production outfits to be willing to pay in order to have rights to produce disc golf, because it shows you that it's gone from guy with camera walking onto course, filming and putting on YouTube with, just kind of crummy graphics, one camera, to a, beautiful television product. And we've seen that emerge because of the amount of interest and the amount of money that has flowed in through advertising and YouTube revenue, et cetera. And I think that's very exciting. Yeah. But I don't think that the singular act of Jomez paying the Pro Tour is like the earth-shattering industry move, whereas I think the explosion of new manufacturers shows you the durability of the market and and all these new players and the demand for discs being so high that people couldn't keep discs in stock for 18 months. So I'm going to go with new manufacturers as well.
Oh, you're going with new manufacturers.
Yeah. Wait, did you not?
I didn't. No.
Wait, what?
I thought it was really close, but I said I went back. I said the lack of culmination is the reason I chose not to go with new manufacturers.
I misunderstood. Wow, I need to listen better. Jeez.
You're okay. However, that being said, I am willing to give it to new manufacturers because mine was like coin toss close, and I was very easily persuaded by the potential and like the upcoming new manufacturers point as being the selling point.
Whoa. So. I need to listen better. You spent so long talking about the new manufacturers. I thought you were arguing for it, but
because I came into the show thinking I was going to, and then like last second I was like, no, I really think it still is post-production rights. But man, I was going back and forth. So emergence to new manufacturers is good with me.
Okay, well there you go. So somebody did suggest to us that we need to have a third voting body next time we do this. I like that plan. I think next year we'll do that. We'll get somebody else on here to cast the tie-breaking votes. But fair enough. I guess you were persuaded enough by what I just said.
That's right. I mean, granted, you had to blow a little bit, and I fell over the line, so it didn't take much. All right. Our final matchup in the quarterfinals is the Champions Cup inaugural year and staying at W. Jackson in number 2. And the number 10 seed, the return of the Euros.
This is the weakest matchup. I think that whatever wins here is going to lose in semis, is my prediction. I think I have to go with the structural change of the new major. I think the return of the Europeans is like, it's a great storyline. It was great to talk about this year. Christian already made the semis, and without that, you're kind of grasping at stuff to feel like it was like really impactful on the year. I mean, there were good moments, Evelina and Henna, certainly big stories, both because they were so spectacular at throwing the disc and so bad at putting it. You had, the Albert Tom, I mentioned that. Nicholas Antela played great down the stretch at USDGC, had a chance to win. There were moments, but it doesn't feel like that was like, besides the fact that they returned post-COVID, like that was the story. It wasn't that they were so good on the course, except Kristen, obviously. So for me, I think I have to go with the establishment of a major, a wooded focused major that stays in one place in the spring. I mean, this is something that I was complaining about and asking for years on this podcast. Years. And so they finally did it. And it was so successful that they actually threw out plans to have it be a traveling major and just stick it at the PDGA headquarters. It seems so obvious. Should have done it all along. But, despite all of the concerns about it feeling like weird or lesser than, obviously they had the stupid format first. Ultimately, they made all the right choices and have now set up what is going to, I think, feel like a very important, prestigious major in a short amount of time. I don't think it's going to take us that long to get to the point where it's like, wow, Champions Cup, this is a big one. And it's not there yet. But the fact that we have a more standardized calendar of majors is going to yield long-term dividends in the sport. It's like there's something, there's a je ne sais quoi about the fact that you have 4 majors that's hard to identify like why it feels so right, but it does. It's the right amount of times to get excited. It has the right spacing across the season. And so that is what I would vote for.
I think I agree with you. It's funny because, what I was going to say, and I still think is true, is if we had one more European who played super successfully, Nicholas Antela wins USDGC, for example, I think this might be a different conversation. But because Kristen has her own category, it feels like the rest, I mean, like you said, is a little bit lackluster. I think that's probably going to change quickly, but yeah, this just isn't the year, unfortunately. It's
not the year. Yeah. I think, if we go into next year and the Europeans win a bunch of tour events and it starts to look like, wow, like we have some some MPO players that really can compete at the top level. And you know, of course, the Simon thing is weird. It's unfair not to include him. He should be included, but I think even if you include him, it still doesn't feel like he didn't return. You know, he's been here.
Exactly. Well,
So.
His title was literally the Resurgence of Simon. So
well, right. He got his own category too.
We took the two best Europeans, cut them out, and said, "Wow, those Europeans are terrible."
All right, let's move on to the semifinals. Tour consolidation versus Kristen Tatar's dominance. What do you think, Josh? Who's going to the finals?
Oh man, this one is so hard because the tour, like I think what you said about the tour consolidation one is so true, and what makes it so hard is that it's like people forgot that happened. If you talk to people and gave them our bracket and were like, you know, Phil, or, you know, gave everybody else their top storylines bracket, how many people would even pretty committed fans would remember this at the end of the season? It's so behind the scenes and invisible, but I don't remember what the example is exactly, but like the fact we're not talking about the poorly run events of the national tour like demonstrates the success. And the fact that it's not in the news points to the power of the tour consolidation. But like when you think about the most talked about storyline, the most obvious and in your face storyline, it's Kristen Tatar's dominance. That was the one that permeated the season. And so you have the two most durable and impactful storylines, the one off the course versus the one on the course, in terms of how they like permeated the season. And it's such a difficult decision when putting that up against each other. But
dare I say this is the de facto final?
It really feels like
we'll see in a moment.
I think there are going to be more structural changes, and it's hard to point to this one as being the structural change that, you know, the be all end all. We have another structural change on the other side of the bracket about getting a fourth major. And one day there's a chance the Pro Tour takes over the majors, right? And then we're going to be talking about that one as being the top. And then one day the Silver Series is going to break off as its own independent tour. And that's going to be the next structural change. Like, this is not the one, in my opinion. If you had to pick one, it would be Steve Dodge creating the Pro Tour. Right, that's probably the structural change that set the ball rolling. This is another one of the pins falling along that structural line. And while it is an important deal, when I think about the season of 2022, I think Kristen Tatar at her Hall of Fame induction, as when you talk about FPO, like this is a monumental season for the sport in on-course performance, and I think that has to take priority in this case. So I'm giving it to Kristen.
This is a storylines bracket. It's not a business bracket. It's not a
that would be
what will have
bracket.
More of an impact in 20 years bracket. Those are considerations in a storyline conversation, but the storyline, no, people are probably sitting and being like, dude, nobody cares about the tour consolidation. People are screaming that it's a podcast right now. Nobody cares about this. It's true.
It is true.
And why should people care? It is important, but it's not interesting for fans necessarily unless you're nerdy about it.
Uh-huh.
Kristen Tatar was the story of the season. She was the story of the season. It is an easy decision for me for her as the 5 seed to upset the number 1 seed here in the semifinals. And not much more needs to be said. It just, at the end of the day, this is a sports fandom podcast. And yes, we talk about the industry, but we also mostly talk about the disc golf. And we got to take the story that people were talking about and not the one that we were talking about.
Correct.
And so Kristen Tatar moves on.
The final semifinal then is the emergence of new manufacturers at 11 and the Champions Cup inaugural year staying at WR Jackson.
That's garbage.
Charlie, how do you feel about our upcoming finals matchup?
I don't know. Like, I guess the emergence of new manufacturers. I don't know. This is flat. This whole side of the bracket just feels a little flat. I don't think there were like wrong decisions made along the way, but it's an underwhelming semi. I guess I go with emergence of new manufacturers. I think it's great to have a fourth major. I've already described it a bunch, so I won't go into it more. I just think that long run, the growth of the industry, which is being represented right now by how many successful new companies are coming, into their own, is going to have longer run effects, because now you're at a point where you're going to start to see consolidation. You're going to start to see bigger companies buying smaller companies. Mm-hmm. I'm just waiting. I am just waiting for a major golf brand to buy a disc golf brand. That is just a matter of time.
Yeah,
it could be right around the corner, and now there's all these options to pick from. Right, you don't. If
you're not buying Innova,
Callaway wants to come in and buy Innova, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough, because either Innova is not going to want to sell, or the price is just going to be astronomical. Now they can pick off a smaller brand, and they can start to build it up with a massive marketing apparatus that they already have in place, and they can co-brand. I mean, you could sell people like a 3 club and a 3 disc starter pack, and you just cross-sell the sports.
Yep.
And I mean, honestly, like I feel like I am somebody who is easily cross-sellable. I like to play golf. I also like to play disc golf. They are slightly different. I think I prefer to play disc golf because it's kind of easier to go and play, and it's like a little more casual. It's a little less expensive. But I also like playing golf. It's fun to go play golf. So I think that's coming, but it's not here yet. But at the end of the day, like the fourth major thing, it's like, it's a good story from the year, but it just doesn't gonna have it was so obvious. So I'm picking manufacturers, but I don't necessarily feel super strongly about it.
If Callaway were to help create at programs at golf courses where you could go play 9 and 9, where 100%. You pick the front 9 of golf, back 9 of disc golf, or vice versa, I would play that every weekend in the summer. That would be so much fun.
And it's not like it's some kind of crazy impossibility.
No,
like,
not at all.
It's not hard to put disc golf baskets in at a golf course.
Yep. So yeah, it would be really cool. I agree with you. And I think we both made pretty impassioned speeches for the emergence of new manufacturers, even though I didn't vote for it in the previous round. So that leaves us with our finals matchup. It is Kristen Tatar's dominance, a 5 seed, against the emergence of new manufacturers, the 11 seed.
Crazy upsets this year.
Yeah, it really was.
Well,
Charlie?
Look, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I think Kristen is the story of the year. I think, you could argue that she should have been a higher seed in this overall tournament. But at the end of the day, that just feels like the one that has defined the year in a way that none of the other stories in this bracket really did. And there were great moments, but like when you think about encore stuff, there were lots of other smaller storylines. You had, a bunch of them were in the bracket. It just, none of it measured up to, wow, Kristen did it again. Wow. Yeah. Kristen expanded her lead at Worlds. Like, just such electric disc golf. So fun to watch. And, you look at the totality of the season, and that's the thing that I think we're all going to remember.
I think so too. And the reason why I don't think it was seeded higher is because we are disc golf nerds. And when we were building this bracket, we get suckered in by the structural and industrial changes, right? That Kristen is the top on-course performance, but the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 seed were all about structural rule changes, tour changes, right? Like that's what we talk about here on this podcast. I think in addition to the golf, we really analyze that side of the sport a lot. But when it comes down to it, that's not why we're in the sport. It's not why any of us are in the sport. It's interesting. It's cool. We like to talk about it. But the reason that we are here today is because we like to watch disc golf. And nobody gave us better disc golf this season, better performances, and more exciting tournaments than Kristen Tatar. And so it's right that she wins the top storyline bracket as a result.
So congratulations to Kristen, who's just getting dubs right and left right now. I mean, she's like on the covers of magazines in Estonia. She's like she's nominated for Estonian Sportswoman of the Year. She won the tour championship. She won $1 zillion. She has a zillion Graces selling everywhere. She won this bracket. She's the most popular player in disc golf. Dub City.
So I have a question for you real quick, Charlie. You just said that she's getting dubs right and left. Do you usually say right and left? I've always heard it said getting dubs left and right. After your apples to oranges incident, I just want to check before you get ruined in the comments. I need to know how
left
this
and
goes.
right and left. I don't know. I don't know what I say.
Okay, I have never in my entire life heard somebody getting dubs right and left. I've only heard left and right. So I need to know if this is like my own crazy thing or if you're going to get harassed in the emails again.
I don't know. If you keep picking on me, though, I'm going to start picking on you back. So
I'm not trying to pick on you. It's the little idioms that we say wrong that people just go after us.
Well, people let me know what you think. Upshot@ultiworld.com. Right and left and right. I mean, I think 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Or maybe I should say half a dozen and 6 of the other. And really screw with people's heads. All right, that's going to do it for our show. Can't wait for Thursday gaffs and weird stuff bracket coming up. Could be one of the most fun shows of the year. So if you have any gaffs or weird things that you want included for consideration, because I'm sure we're going to forget one or two things. It's just it's like hard to keep track of these. Next year, we're going to like take notes during the season. I think we have pretty much the big ones, but if there's anything that you say, oh, you absolutely have to include this thing. By the way, I just thought of one, Josh. Drew Gibson slipping and falling while he was going to the basket. Put that on there as a potential consideration. Email us, upshot@ultiworld.com, and hit us up in the Discord if you are a subscriber. Our sub bonus this week will come out in a couple of days, and it is going to be this year's semifinalists of the bracket versus last year's semifinalists of the bracket. We're going to do a combo 2021-22, kind of like post-COVID, what's the biggest story of the last 2 years discussion. So don't miss it. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you Thursday right here on The Upshot.